income determination in the short run, and I hope you can see on the screen. It's visible?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. So we were doing the simple Keynesian model. Now we will bring in, we have discussed about the multiplier without the government. Now we discuss the same model by bringing in the government sector. We all know that during recession, people expect the government to do something. The government can directly affect the level of equilibrium income in two separate ways. One, by government purchases of goods and services, G, which forms a component of the aggregate demand, and two, taxes and transfers that affect the relationship between output and income Y and the disposable income YD. What is the disposable income? You may recall it is income available for consumption or saving. Now recall, disposable income is the net income available for spending by households after they receive transfers and pay taxes to the government. It thus consists of income plus transfers minus taxes. That is Y plus TR minus TA. Accordingly, our previous consumption function becomes C is equal to C bar, which is the autonomous consumption expenditure, plus small c, that is marginal propensity to consume, as a function of disposable income, which we all know is Y plus TR minus TA. Now, our final step will be to specify the fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is a policy of the government with regard to the level of government purchases, the level of transfers, and the tax structure. We assume that A, government purchases are constant G bar. Transfers are also constant TR bar, and there is a proportional income tax, a fraction T of income in the form of taxes. So G is equal to G bar, TR is equal to TR bar, and TA is equal to TY. So this is how we have put it algebraically. With this specification of fiscal policy, we rewrite the consumption function as C is equal to C bar plus C into the disposable income. C as a function of disposable income, which if we collect terms, we get an expression as C bar plus small c into TR bar plus C into 1 minus TY. We have a few points to note here. First, transfers raise autonomous consumption spending by the marginal propensity to consume out of disposable income small c times the amount of transfers. On the other hand, income taxes lower consumption spending at each level of income because households' consumption is related to disposable income and taxes reduce disposable income. So we find that transfers increase autonomous consumption and taxes reduce consumption expenditure through the fall in disposable income. Now, while the marginal propensity to consume out of disposable income remains small c, the marginal propensity to consume out of income is now c into 1 minus t, where 1 minus t is the fraction of income left after taxes. So we combine the two expressions to get aggregate demand. What is the aggregate demand? It is, you can recall, C plus I plus G plus NX. Has someone else come? Yes. Okay. Now, aggregate income, as I was saying, is equal to C plus I plus G plus NX. You will recall that these are consumption, investment, government expenditure, and net exports. Now, we substitute for the consumption function as we have derived just in the equation above, which is C plus C bar C bar plus small c into TR bar plus C into 1 minus T into Y. This is our consumption function. To that, we have an autonomous investment I bar, autonomous government expenditure G bar, and this is also net exports is also fixed. Now we collect terms and we find that this entire part is constant. This does not depend on Y. So we club everything together and get A bar. So what happens to the slope of the aggregate demand schedule? It becomes flatter because households now have to pay part of every rupee of income in taxes and are left with only 1 minus T of that rupee. What does it imply? It implies that marginal propensity to consume out of income is now small c into 1 minus t instead of just small c. So we now try to find the equilibrium level of income. What do we know? Income is equal to aggregate demand. Income or output is equal to aggregate demand. So Y is equal to AD. Now using the equation 26, or the last equation, what do we find? That Y is equal to the aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is A bar plus small c into 1 minus ty. We solve this equation for equilibrium income y0 and we get, how do we do it? We just take this term to the left hand side and get A bar here, and this is what we get, and this will give us our equilibrium income as y naught is equal to 1 by 1 minus c into 1 minus t. This we multiply by the amount of autonomous expenditure. So comparing this equation to the previous equation of equilibrium income, we note a couple of things. Firstly, the government sector raises autonomous spending by the amount of government purchases G bar, and by the amount of induced spending out of net transfer CTR bar. Yeah. The presence of income tax lowers the multiplier since it reduces the induced increase of consumption out of changes in income. It implies inclusion of taxes flatten the aggregate demand curve and hence reduces the multiplier. Now, here we find introduction of the government sector act as automatic stabilizer in any mechanism in the economy. An automatic stabilizer is any mechanism in the economy that automatically or without government intervention reduces the amount by which output changes in response to a change in autonomous demand. One explanation of the business cycle is that it is caused by shifts in the autonomous demand, especially investment. How does it happen? Sometimes investors are optimistic and investments are high, and so is output. But sometimes they are pessimistic and hence both investment and output are low. Swings in investment demand leads to automatic stabilizers such as a proportional income tax intakes. This reduces the multiplier and leads to a smaller effect on output. Unemployment benefits, for example, enable the unemployed youth to continue consuming even though they do not have a job. Transfer payments rises when income falls. This leads to demand falling less than when someone becomes unemployed but receives benefits than when there were no benefits. This makes the multiplier smaller and output more stable. So this is how the inbuilt stabilizer works. Now we see the effects of a change in fiscal policy through an illustration. We have the same diagram, the same Keynesian cross-diagonal model. Here we have our autonomous expenditure as A bar, and this is our aggregate demand function, and aggregate demand cuts the 45-degree line at point E, giving us the equilibrium level of income OY0. Now, this is a stable equilibrium we assume. Now, there is an increase in government expenditure by the amount delta G bar. This is the increase in government expenditure. Now, at this level of income, what happens? No, first, what is the effect of this increase in government expenditure? Our aggregate demand curve shifts parallelly upward to AD dash. Now, at equilibrium income, we were at OY0. Here, aggregate demand is more than output by this amount. What does it mean? Demand more than output. That means the inventories decrease. When inventories decrease, producers try to produce more, as a result of which output increases, and finally we reach the equilibrium income OY dash. The OY dash and our equilibrium point is E dash. Now, this is how we move on to a higher level of income when there is increase in government purchases. So, it's written, the steps are written down here. The initial level of income is Y0, and increase in government purchases is a change in autonomous spending, which shifts the aggregate demand schedule upward by an amount equal to the increase in government purchases. At the initial level of output and income, demand for goods exceed output. This leads the firm to produce or expand production until new equilibrium point is reached. Now our basic question is, by how much does this income expand? Change in equilibrium income will be equal to the change in aggregate demand. So delta Y0 is nothing but delta G bar plus C into 1 minus T delta Y0, where the other terms are constant, so there is no change in C bar, TR bar and NX bar. Thus, the change in equilibrium is delta Y0 is equal to 1 by 1 minus C into 1 minus T into delta G bar. We can term this as alpha G. So, this is delta Y0 is equal to alpha G into delta G bar, where alpha G is the multiplier in presence of income tax. Now we come to the increase in transfer payments. Autonomous spending A bar will increase by only C into delta TR bar, which will lead to an increase in output by alpha G into C into delta TR bar. This implies that the multiplier for transfer payments is smaller than that for government spending by a factor C, because part of any increase in TR bar is saved. Any payment that an individual gets, he either consumes or saves. This is applicable for transfer payments too. So we see that if the government raises marginal tax rates, two things happen. The direct effect is that aggregate demand will be reduced, since the increased tax reduce disposable income and therefore consumption, and the multiplier will be smaller, which implies shocks will have a smaller effect on aggregate demand. What are the implications of this? Since changes in government spending and taxes affect the level of income, it seems that fiscal policy can be used to stabilize the economy. When the economy is in a recession or growing slowly, taxes should be cut or spending increased to get output to rise. When the economy is booming, taxes should be increased or government spending cut to get back down to full employment. Is it clear up till here? Is it clear up till here? Any questions? Are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. One thing I have forgotten to tell you, that to write your name in the chat box, name, roll number, whatever you have, and send a screenshot of all your names together. Okay. Now we move on to the concept of stability of equilibrium. Before going into stability, you might recall that national income is measured in current prices and is known as money or nominal GNP. The nominal GNP can be broken down to price component P and real output component Y, so that Y is equal to P into Y. Now, capital letters are usually used for nominal amounts and small letters for real amounts. The previous discussion was taken from Don Bush and Fisher, who use the capital letters, but when we use Branson, macroeconomic theory and policy, we find everywhere small letters are used. So this is a story about real and nominal GNP values. So it should not be any problem conceptually. Now we look at the stability of equilibrium. Now we have a horizontal I bar plus G graph. That means both I bar and G, that is investment and government expenditure, are independent of the level of income. But savings plus tax function is an increasing function of income. Where do we get equilibrium? We get equilibrium here, where savings plus taxes is equal to I bar plus G, or investment plus government expenditure. We have seen this before, the equality of savings plus and investment in one of our previous discussions. So here we will get an equilibrium at this level, YE. Now, if equilibrium level is, income level is below the equilibrium level, that is at Y1, what happens? Here, demand is greater than demand is greater than what the sellers thought would be, as a result of which their stock of inventories decline, as a result of which what happens? They increase production and we move towards the equilibrium level of income. Now, if savings plus taxes is greater than investment plus government expenditure, what is happening? Sellers are unable to sell what they had planned to, as a result of which there is an accumulation of inventories, as a result of which they will reduce production and hence income will fall. So if income level is lower than the equilibrium level, it has an inherent tendency to increase. If this level is greater than the equilibrium level of income, it has a tendency to fall. So this is the concept of stability of equilibrium. Now we move on to another very important concept, which is paradox of thrift. Now, increase in a desire to save will automatically shift the savings plus taxes function upward. Now, we had equilibrium at this point where I bar plus G was equal to S0 plus T. This was our equilibrium level of income. Now see what happens. Here, at every level of income, savings has increased. So at this equilibrium level of income also savings will increase, and savings plus taxes will be greater than investment plus government expenditure. What will happen then? We just learned. That means the producers are unable to sell what they had planned to. As a result, as a result of which, inventories will start piling up and they will decrease income. And we will get a new level of income Y0, which is lower than the previous level of income. Since savings is a function of income, savings will fall. So what was the initial step? The initial step was the desire to increase saving. Where have we ended? We have ended with a level of equilibrium income which is below the previous level of equilibrium income, with the savings level absolutely the same. So the desire to save more has landed up with lower income and same amount of saving. But this does not explain the paradox clearly. In order to explain the paradox clearly, we assume that the investment function is an increasing function of income too. So you see, it was a horizontal line in the previous figure, but here it has a slight upward slope. So as income increases, investment increases. So we start with this initial level of income Y0, that is initial equilibrium, where our S0 plus T is equal to I plus G. So here we have not put I bar plus G bar, since this is an increasing function of Y0, of Y. So at this level of income, the desire of the people to save more increases, as a result of which our savings plus tax function shifts upward to S1 plus T. At this level of income, what happens is that the output, the sellers are unable to sell as planned before, so there is an increase in stock of inventories, as a result of which producers tend to decrease output. So they will move this side, and ultimately we will get an equilibrium where the new savings function intersects the uh, I plus G function. Now watch here. Here, as before, income has fallen. In the previous diagram, our savings was constant. But here, savings has also fallen. So what is happening? An increase in desire to save is leading us to a point where our savings itself is falling. This is known as the paradox of thrift. So what does it say? An increase in desire to save leads to a decrease in the realized saving level, since the drop in income reduces planned investment. This is known as the paradox of thrift. So we will stop here today. If any of you have any questions,